Hello and welcome to another day of Bible time. And today we come to one of those interesting sections of Scripture. It's First Chronicles, chapters 23 and 24. And it's just like, outlining the duties of the Levites and the priests. And you might think, well, what is there for me? How can this possibly apply to today? What's going on? What am I supposed to do with a scripture like this? Well, here's where it gets really interesting, and this is what makes Bible study so fascinating, is you got to do a little bit of work. There's work you got to do. There's things that you have to uncover. There are all kinds of issues in play here. For example, there's a language issue. This was written in Hebrew. You don't speak Hebrew. Nobody speaks that kind of Hebrew today. It's considered a dead language, even though there's a modern Hebrew. You don't understand the language, you don't understand the culture, and most importantly, you probably don't understand the history. And that's the thing we've been trying to emphasize here on these Bible times through Chronicles, is that there's a historical setting. These are people who were taken away to exile in Babylon because their country had been defeated and destroyed, and now they're coming back, and they're coming back to restore their land. And they're facing a lot of discouragement. And so this book was written to those people to encourage them, to motivate them, to strengthen them, to be faithful, to rebuild the temple, rebuild Jerusalem, rebuild the land, restore their worship of the Lord and all of that. And that's what it's here for. And what you see in this section is David preparing for the worship at the temple, which is a big issue to the people who are back, who are building the temple. Well, once we build it, what are we going to do? Well, this is going to help them in doing that. But what you see here too about David is something really interesting, because we know he is a mighty man of war, a great military leader. That was David. We also know that he was a wonderful songwriter. I mean, a lot of the Psalms were written by David. And so here's a man. He's got incredible abilities at military, incredible abilities at music. But what you're seeing here is that he has incredible abilities as an administrator. And that is critical to a leader, to have those administrative skills. That's what you see David demonstrating here. And what he does here, what he sets up here in the work and the service of the temple, I mean, it was a critical piece of information here. This was what was restored under the revivals of Hezekiah and Josiah. It is going to be what the people put into practice, the people who have come back and build the temple. You're going to see that under Nehemiah. In fact, this was the practice that was established all the way into New Testament times. And it's because David was such a masterful administrator. And so you can see now why this administrative thing here is so important to the people who originally read this book, who are putting things together at the temple that they are building, and this is to help them to revive and restore the proper worship and service at that temple. This is critical information to them. And what it tells us is that as magnificent as the temple was, and especially the one that Solomon had built, the people were more important than the building. Did you hear that? The people are more important than the building. That's a common problem today, where it's like the building is the most important thing. We got to have the right building. We got to be able to do things in the building. It's all about the building a lot of times. The people are more important than the building. The building is just there to serve a purpose of serving the people. And the other thing that this tells us is that worship is something that needs to be addressed carefully. You and I, we don't get to just worship any old way we want to, and any particular church doesn't get to worship God any old way they want to. No, they need to worship God the way God says to worship Him. And so administrative things are important. It does make a difference because we need to administrate according to God's plan, God's purposes, God's design for how He wants to be worshiped. And you'll notice, too, that proper worship requires a lot of godly leaders, requires a lot of godly people who are willing to serve, to carry out the leadership and the necessary things for worship. And it just talks about the importance of service within the worship of God. And that's something that you and I can think about it at our church. You may attend the services faithfully all the time. You may participate in the services all the time. But there are important ways to serve. And we have ways that you can serve all the time, even just on Sunday morning. So it doesn't require some other time for you to show up at something. You can come as an usher. You can serve as an usher. You can serve as a greeter. You can serve in children's ministry. There's lots of ways to serve on a Sunday, and I would encourage you to take advantage of those. In fact, if this is kind of stirring you up, this idea of worshiping the Lord and doing it carefully and doing it with zeal, I would encourage you to call the church office and say, "Here I am, use me. What do you need? What can I do?" I would encourage you to do that and to make yourself available to serve, because to do this right, to do it with excellence, to do it with the proper amount of care, to show that the people are more important than the building. And that's why ushers are so important. Greeters are so critical. Ministering to children is such an important thing. We need you to be involved in doing that service. And so just as this was meant to stir up the people in Ezra's day as they're restoring the temple and the city, may it stir you up too to serve as well. And let me just encourage you too, as we close out today. This is something we've been talking about since Labor Day, and that is praying for revival in America. There's certainly a great need for that. There's a great need for revival in our country, just like they're trying to bring about revival in Israel during the time of Ezra. And if you're praying about something specific, I mean, if you're just praying, "The Lord, please bring revival to America," okay, that's one thing. But if there's something in particular that you're praying about, would you leave that in a comment down below here today? Would you just tell us what you're praying about in particular in terms of revival in America? That might be an encouragement to all the rest of us. It might encourage us to pray along with you for that particular thing. So lots to learn from this, even though it's like a list of the duties of the Levites and the priests. There's principles here, timeless principles that applied to the people in Ezra's day. They apply to you and me today. Let's put them into practice. And I'll see you tomorrow for more Bible time.